Okay. In the Darkness of Shadow Moses, The Unofficial Truth. Author Nastasha Romanenko. Reviewed by George Franklin. Some topics in the recent American past have the immediacy and the power that still engage our collective imagination. Names like the Grassy Knoll or Roswell roll off our tongue with deliberateness, preserved by most other nations for holy lands. With this new non-fiction account from Nastasha Romanenko, Shadow Moses, the scene of a nuclear siege 2 years ago, is set to join the ranks. Official history states that the takeover of a nuclear weapons disposal facility on a lonely outpost in the Fox Islands, Alaska, was the work of a radical right-wing group. Their demands for the release of group members incarcerated in federal penitentiaries were never met, and the incident was speedily resolved by the successful deployment of a commando unit. B.S., the author asserts. Romanenko says that she served as an advisor to the Nuclear Emergency Search Team, deconstructs what she claims to be a cover-up. Story by the government with precision. According to the author, Shadow Moses Island was nothing less than the U.S. Army's testing grounds for a top-secret weapon known as Metal Gear Rex, an all-terrain bipedal tank with advanced nuclear capabilities. As for the facility's takeover, Romanenko alleges that it was the U.S. military's own shadowy wet works force, known as Foxing, that staged an armed insurrection, a bid for Rex's possession. The government responds to this crisis by sending in a lone operative, a former Foxhound member known only by the codename Solid Snake, into Shadow Moses. His infiltration is aided by a remote mission, control team consisting of unidentified Colonel Campbell, Foxhound Medical Chief Naomi, radar and electronics expert Lee, supposedly a teenager, and Arthur herself. Once on the island, Snake joins forces with Metal Gear's developer-turned-prisoner, Otacon, to eradicate the weapon of mass destruction. Among the other remarkable characters that make an appearance in Romanenko's expose is another Foxhound, a revolver virtuoso called Shalashaska, aka Revolver Ocelot. One of the most controversial allegations in the book deals with this figure's connection to a disavowed Russian militia led by a Colonel Golubovich. Romanenko paints a bleak picture of a 1,000-strong, highly disciplined army with nuclear weaponry operating covertly within the American border. Even more irresistible to conspiracy scholars and students of recent history is her thinly veiled suggestion that the whole affair was planned from the beginning by certain forces inside the U.S. government. The U.S. Army and the usual suspect of federal agencies have issued a statement denouncing the book as a complete fabrication. However, with the number of detailed eyewitness accounts that back up the author's assertions cropping up daily on the web, the denials serve more to enhance the book's growing reputation. Shadow Moses is an engrossing read for casual and serious readers alike, and promises to involve readers in a meaty debate over the truth of the matter for many years to come. Excerpted from the literary review column, All Booked Up, the New York Mirror. Alright, the shocking conspiracy behind Shadow Moses. The Shocking Conspiracy Behind Shadow Moses by Gary McGolden. Ooh, this is 129 pages. Ooh, I might not be able to get through all of this because I do have to leave in an hour to go see Thor. So I'm going to go ahead and get through all this as much as I can. The island of Shadow Moses lies due north of Alaska's Fox Islands, deep in the Arctic Circle. Above one of its rocky cliffs stands a cabin normally used for meteorological surveys, and it was here that I found myself, seated on a chair with my hands bound behind my back and a burlap sack covering my entire head. A blizzard rages outside, and the cabin was a dark, silent patch somewhere inside the storm. I can sense at least 4 men around me. They had been interrogating me for what felt like hours now. The burlap sack is pungent with traces of coffee beans. Who is this by again? Gary McGolden. Okay. In the biting cold of the cabin, images of Brazil came to me, unbidden. Alleys coiled through with vivid, unintended profession of flowers. Children's skin like frothy chocolate. Sunshine capable of burning out the cornea, erupting between palm frowns. I can feel my senses starting to fail. The man in the front of me asks for the second or the 100th time. I'm going to ask you again. What's on the optical disc? Told you, I don't know. I just found it, okay? You're lying, you bastard. A fist explodes into the pit of my stomach, bringing up a peanut butter sandwich of many hours ago, along with the rusty taste of blood. The relentless beating and numerous knife cuts of the past hour have my whole body screaming with pain, but I refuse to tell them what they wanted. I had too much invested at this point, too many days of dangerous investigation into the story of a lifetime. There was no way I was going to give it up all at this point. That's enough, a voice spoke up from somewhere in the back of the cabin. We have the disc back. Just get rid of him so we can get out of this place. Even in my current sorry state, I was still a journalist. He had said, we have the disc back. That meant that my hosts were the original owners of that optical disc. The last piece of the puzzle was in its place. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that everything recorded on that disc was true, and that the conspiracy I had suspected did in fact exist. At that moment, I heard a window shatter. The raging storm outside seemed to gain entry to the cabin in an instant, and I heard thin screams from the captors that encircled my chair. The next second, they had already fallen heavily onto the floor. The brief confusion ended before I regained enough presence of mind to even panic. Whoever was now here, whatever had happened, my tormentors were obviously out of commission. But now I could hear measured footsteps approaching across the floor. If this person had just saved my life, who was it? Or was I about to share the other's fate? The footsteps came to a halt in front of me, but strangely enough, I did not feel any sort of a presence nearby. The burlap was slowly lifted from around my head, pulled off by an unseen hand. The stinging night air cooled my face, and my eyes gradually regained focus in the darkened room, and I can finally see who it was that stood before me. Just out of the sight of most of its citizens, a massive conspiracy determines the working of this nation. Weapons of mass destruction secretly developed by the military. Super soldiers re-engineered into war machines through genetic manipulation. A killer virus that only targets specific individuals with deadly accuracy. Tanks that walk rather than roll and carry your nuclear payload. A covert organization, the third and the most powerful political party, my encounter with which landed me in this chair in the Alaskan winter. All of these are a part of the truth I found sealed within the optical disc, and I intended to share what I have learned in these pages to follow. That includes everything I now know about our government and the secret arena and even greater power pulls the strings. This is the truth many have glimpsed, but never dared to talk about. Everything detailed in this book actually happened, and after I lived it, my world was no longer the same safe place I knew. Neither, I promise, will be yours if you have the courage to keep going. It all began a month ago. Dun dun dun. The postman rings. A month before my dramatic escape from death on Shadow Moses, I was having late breakfast in my apartment in New York. Ever since an alien abduction episode in my childhood, I'd been plagued by a persistent ringing in my ears. A large patch of mud was my undoing. I slipped, fell, and was knocked unconscious. When I came to, it was already dawn. Later, I was trying to see the bump on the back of my head in the mirror when I saw it instead. A small hole, about the size of a pinprick. had been made behind my ear. You learn a little something when you watched as much TV as I did. There was no doubt that I had been abducted by a passing UFO and had spent the hours while unconscious with alien beings. Unfortunately, no one in the area recalled seeing a UFO, and not a single person had the sense to listen to my story. I realize now that this was the day I decided to uncover the truth for a living and become a journalist. But back to the present day. It turned out that the ringing wasn't in my ear, but from the doorbell. The thing shrieked somewhere south of a baritone bat sonar, barely within the range of a human hearing. Blamed the mingling it took from a particular displeased visitor. Outside the door was a mailman, and in the mailman's hand was a thick manila envelope. On the envelope was a label addressed to me. A letter bomb? I pressed my ear against the envelope and concentrated hard, but not a tick from the thing. Of course, no one uses analog watches in bombs these days. That's why they call it the digital age. In fact, why would there even be a watch in a letter bomb? The point is that the unlucky recipient opens it and the bomb goes off, which means that it's actually the completely silent envelopes that are dangerous. I knew that opening that flap would send my eggs to the big omelet in the sky. But you don't get to be an investigative journalist for thinking inside the box. I tore through the bottom of the envelope instead. Rip? No. The contents of the suspicious envelope dropped to the floor with lightning speed. In this world, you can never be too careful. Let this be a warning to you readers. When circumstances compel you to open an envelope from the bottom, turn it upside down first. As a rule, I discovered, objects fall down. And this is what happened to the contents of my lethal envelope. Straight down into a half-eaten deep of a delivery pizza forgotten on the floor. I don't recall when exactly this food item arrived on these premises, but the thing was definitely a museum piece by now. Fortunately, it wasn't a bomb, but an optical storage disc, now liberally smeared with peanut butter. The disc was the kind that comes in a clear plastic casing, through which the rainbow sheen of the circular unit shone. I gazed into it a while, thinking of the UFO from that fateful day. Anyway, I fished the optical disc out, noting the lack of a label. A quick wash in the sink got rid of the crud it had accumulated. The disc was drying by the window as I hunted through the now harmless envelope for clues. A single sheet of Xerox paper was stuck on the inside and it read, "From the desk of Max Smithson, Editor-in-Chief, Make a Surprise Magazine. I'm mailing you this optical disc that was sent to the edit department. It's right up your alley. See if you can turn up something more. We'll do a book if you get enough stuff together. This is your chance for a comeback, so don't screw it up." Max is an old friend, and used to manage most of my book deals way back when. We hadn't seen each other much since I gave up writing. Now that he has the right to tell me about comebacks and screwing up. Not that he has the right to tell me about comebacks and screwing up, but I find myself growing excited by the prospect of writing another book. But there was a problem, and it was a big one. How the hell was I going to get the disc's content? The shocking truth within. My next door neighbor is a starving college student, and I hit him up for the use of his computer now and then. I banged on his door and screamed repeatedly until he shuffled up to the door half asleep. Once inside, I made a beeline for that piece of junk and stuck the disk into the drive. The icon appeared on the display with a gentle whir. The file name read, "In the Darkness of Shadow Moses." But an urgent click on the icon only brought up an error message. What nefarious scheme was this? What secret encryption was preventing me from accessing the data? I clicked again and again with the same result. Started to gnaw on the keyboard in frustration. The starving student came running over, railing about his equipment. He typed in some moon-man language, avoiding patches of my spit, and a frighteningly cheerful application startup screen appeared on the display. Then, lo and behold, I finally laid my eyes on the dense mass of text, the contents of the disc. At the very top it read, "In the Darkness of Shadow Moses," by Nastasha Romanenko. The starving student was being scholarly and trying to read the text over my shoulder. I knocked him out with a punch to the solar plexus, devoured the file's contents. It was like a blow to the head with a frozen tuna. My brain was reeling from the shock. The file was full of wild stuff, top secret conspiracies, incredible genetic experimentation, cold-blooded military deployment of classified weapons. This was the most incredible stuff I have ever come across. The unofficial facts according to the disc. Most readers should be aware of a series of strange military actions involving an island farther north of Alaska's Fox Islands, some 2 years ago. The island was called Shadow Moses and received a series of well-documented but never explained visits of obvious significance. USS Discovery, an Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine, was ordered away from its designated training area and was confirmed offshore of Shadow Moses Island. It joined an E-3C AWACS that had already and suddenly been deployed to the area, with none other than Jim Hausman, National Security Advisor, aboard. 16 hours later, 6 F-117 Nighthawks with a full payload took off from the Galena Air Force Base for Alaska. Various theories were placed into circulation by the media at the time. Some journalists insisted it had been a foiled invasion attempt by a foreign state. Others suspected a coup d'etat by the part of the U.S. military. I myself wrote an opinion piece for a magazine explaining that Shadow Moses was the Ellis Island for the Greys. The diminutive Grey race is, after all, the most famous of our alien neighbors, notorious for having secret bases all over planet Earth. But according to this file, we had all been off our marks. What had instead unfolded on Shadow Moses was the most major terrorist incident in history. An apocalyptic scenario born out of a government-developed Superman project and a doomsday weapon of the same origin. On that fateful day, the nuclear weapons disposal plant on Shadow Moses had suddenly been seized by an irregular operations squad called Foxan, aided by a group of next-generation super soldiers. And what they threatened was no less than a nuclear strike against the mainland, United States. So how is it that we're still alive? Apparently we have a man known only as Solid Snake, his solitary infiltration of the disposal facility. Thank for that. Believe it or not, this is only the tip of the iceberg as far as the Shadow Moses incident is concerned. The disc contains many more horrifying facts, such as a major government conspiracy, a classified weapon described as a walking nuclear-capable tank, and advanced genetic manipulation projects. Many of these hidden dealings were discovered by Solid Snake as he carried out his mission. It is now my job to relate these facts to you, the readers, but it is still a little too premature to do so. But is it still a little too premature to do so? The content of the disc may, after all, be nothing more than fiction, or even a delusion. After all, who exactly is this Nastasha Romanenko? In search of Nastasha Romanenko. A quick search of the web turned up a few illuminating facts about this elusive writer. Nastasha Romanenko was at one point with the IA. At the time of the Shadow Moses incident, he appears to have been a freelance military analyst, having already resigned from the agency. Nuclear and weapons technology would certainly be right up her alley. And in the disc, she states that she took part in Solid Snake's mission support. Her exact role was as a member of NEST, providing field expertise via the radio. Her intimate involvement in the mission gives her a complete and clear grasp of the facts surrounding the case despite the government's successful cover-up. A look at Romanenko's curriculum vitae and body of papers makes her anti-nuclear stance more than obvious. That, along with the other facts about this person, suggests that unless she suffered a sudden chemical imbalance or is plotting a second career as a Hollywood screenwriter, Nastasha Romanenko does not indulge in expounding conspiracy theories for its own sake. All very interesting. So where is Nastasha Romanenko now? I decided to give Global Elements Incorporated, the book's publisher, a call. Below is a complete transcript of the conversation. Me. Hello. Listen, you left over... Wait, what? Listen, you left over Carnival Prize. What do you know about a woman named Nastasha Romanenko? What in the world kind of wording is that? Who even talks like that? Whoever it was. Hey, your village call. They want their idiot back. Watch your language, freak. Click. Oh my god, the dialogue is hilarious. Alright. Clearly, they're hiding something. Why else the abrupt response and the hasty hang-up? I was on the trail. Something important. Something dangerous. If the content of the disc were true, this Nastasha Romanenko was definitely the woman who knew too much. Her life would be in danger, and she must either have gone to ground or was already dead. That brief telephone conversation spoke volumes. There was a contract out on her life. If this was the price of speaking the truth as described on that disc, the picture was complete. But was everything she wrote really true? I went back to my apartment and packed a bag. I was headed for Shadow Moses, the coldest place. I took a plane out to the northernmost domestic airport and went to see my cousin John D. John D is a hardcore Alaskan and a big-eyed tuna fisherman. When I asked him to drop me off at Shadow Moses Island during one of his trips out to sea, he turned pale and a nervous tic started up at the corner of his eye. Shadow Moses, are you nuts? All the other guys say the place is crawling with the military. If you get even close to the shore, they shine those huge searchlights in your face, and some of my buddies even got interrogated once. I felt a sudden chill of fear along with the certainty that I was on the right track. You're a wuss, you know that? Try being abducted by a UFO. That'll teach you what's really scary. I got a family, you know. I'm not about to go messing around with the man. Okay, you get me as close as you can then. I'll swim the rest of the way. Swim? You're gonna turn into a frozen tuna treat. Don't worry about that, I have an idea. We sailed out for Shadow Moses Island that day. The trip to Shadow Moses. It was colder than the dairy section, and the boat pitched like a subway derailment of caffeine. I shook constantly from the cold, wretched peanut butter into the sea, then down some more to keep warm. A few days passed in this pleasant fashion until John D., drawing lines in his chart, turned to me. I'm sorry, man, but this is as far as I can go. If you really want to do this thing, you're going to have to find your own way. There were at least 20 miles to Shadow Moses according to the chart. But John D. was already a blubbering wreck, and I didn't have the heart to strong-arm him. I steeled my nerves. It's okay. Help me get ready. The plan was brilliant. I gutted a supersized tuna and stuffed some inflated balloons inside, along with a small oil lamp to keep the interior toasty. I would cover the length of my body with the fish and dog paddle my way to the island. Any oxygen shortage could quickly be remedied thanks to the balloon. And my land would appear to be nothing more than a large dead fish swept ashore. All I had to do was slip out of the tuna undetected and investigate the hell out of that place. Absolutely brilliant. I bore the fishy stink of the tuna skin with proper journalistic aplomb. and walked to the edge of the ship's deck. The Arctic wind was numbing even through the wet sea, but I bade John D. a hearty farewell and jumped into the sea. But right then, disaster struck. Actually, it was the tuna spine. Its bony mass conked me hard on the back of my head from the force of the landing. I tried to right myself, but I was jammed tight against the balloons. The tuna started to sink rapidly, and I kicked my legs wildly as about a gallon of seawater rushed into my lungs. To add insult to injury, the lamp fell over, shedding its cover. I could feel the heat of the exposed flame dangerously close to my face, and smell the singed hair. This is why I hate travel. But after what felt like hours, I found myself ashore on Shadow Moses Island. Let's take a moment here to review what happened on the island on that fateful day. Romanenko's disc provides a complete answer. Shadow Moses was no ordinary weapons disposal facility, but served as a secret military training ground among other things. On that day, the Wetworks Commando unit known as Fox Sound and the Next Generation Special Forces Group were conducting joint exercises. Fox Sound is an irregular squad of elite soldiers, equipped and armed to the teeth with the latest technology. They were long-time and strictly behind-the-scenes players throughout recent history, engaging in sabotage, selective assassinations, and other covert military operations. Wherever the United States could not officially intervene, whether it was a civil war, regional unrest, or other types of low-intensity conflict, Foxhound was there. It's unlikely, however, that the average citizen has ever heard of them before. These commandos remain a top-secret government project. Then there's the Next Generation Special Forces Unit. This is a cutting-edge anti-terrorist force newly organized to cope with terrorist incidents, specifically involving weapons of mass destruction, typified in nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare. They draw heavily from former mercenary ranks and are on a diet of rigorous VR training guided by the Force 21 concept. The result is combat capability, which is rumored to surpass even those of the Delta Force and Dev Group, formerly known as SEAL Team 6. Most frightening of all, these soldiers have supposedly been manipulated at the genetic level to increase their combat performance. They were the purebreds among the dogs of war, and they turned on their masters with a surprising demand. Having seized the civilians that were on hand, he demanded that government turn over to them the body of Foxhound's founder and combat genius, the so-called Big Boss. The government had 24 hours to comply, or a nuclear strike would be initiated. But what would motivate them to make such a demand, and how did they intend to make good their threat of a nuclear launch? With these questions still unanswered, the government decided on a seemingly reckless course of action. For this daunting task of stopping a nuclear strike and freeing the hostages from the clutches of these ultimate soldiers, they sent in a single man. His name was Solid Snake, no other than a former member of the now renegade Foxhound, and a legend among mercenaries for single-handedly bringing down the fortress cities of Outer Heaven and Zanzibar land. Your reaction is probably one of incredulity? Just one guy? You may wonder. They decided to gamble the future of the entire world on a single mercenary? I wholeheartedly agree with the sentiment, but there is more to this mission than meets the eye, as I was later to discover. Solid Snake's remote support team. Snake was delivered to the island by USS Discovery, an Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine. He may have been the lone field operative, but there was a distinguished mission control team in contact with him by radio. The overall control of the mission rested with Colonel Roy Campbell aboard the USS Discovery. As a former commander of Foxhound and Snake CO during the 1999 Zanzibar land standoff, he was forcibly called out from retirement to deal with this latest crisis. Also aboard the Discovery was Dr. Naomi Hunter, a genetic engineering expert with the commercial biotech firm ATGC Incorporated. She was in charge of Foxhound's gene manipulation program. Maylene, the architect of the mission's state-of-the-art radar and communication system, was the third team member. Apparently something of an engineering wonderkind, he developed this next-generation communication technology while still a student at MIT. At the time of the mission, she may still have been in her teens. McDonald Miller, a former Foxhound survival instructor, was the only land-bound member of the mission control team. Unlike the other four, Miller was working out of his home in Alaska at his own request. Lastly, Nastasha Romanenko, the author of In the Darkness of Shadow Moses, rounded out the team as an expert on nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction. What terrorist acts were committed here? The hostages and what they tell us. The first task faced by Solid Snake upon his infiltration of Shadow Moses Island was the rescue of the hostages. Two of the captives in particular were considered top priority, but neither survived the mission. Though Snake successfully freed both men, they died suddenly in an identical manner. At the time, the mission control team tentatively attributed the deaths to heart attacks, a diagnosis that was to prove starkly incorrect. The first hostage was Donald Anderson, the head of DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the R&D body of the U.S. Department of Defense. The organization is responsible for planning and overseeing the development of new weapons technology. The other VIP hostage, Kenneth Baker, was the president of Armstead, one of the largest and most powerful defense subcontractors in the country. An overseer of the U.S.'s war technology and a power arms producer don't just happen to meet in an out-of-the-way military outpost. No one reading this account can fail to realize that these two had no business in a nuclear weapons disposal plant. And since neither Anderson nor Baker was in the habit of enjoying winter picnics, Romanenko's assertion that there was a new weapon secretly being developed on the island remains all the more true. According to her, there was indeed such a weapon, and it was close enough to completion to warrant a field test. Well, what exactly was this new weapon? The mother of all weapons. Metal Gear. I'm not sure it's a term that many of you have heard. I only know it as a kind of journalistic urban legend while I was still a beat reporter. It was a phantom bipedal tank that moved with unprecedented speed across difficult terrains such as mountains, desert, and swamps, firing nuclear warheads from locations that were previously impossible. Once this weapon rolled off the assembly line, nuclear strikes could be made from almost any adverse terrain, and the tactical nuclear map for the whole world would be rewritten. This nuclear-capable bipedal tank is said to have lurked in the wings of both outer heaven of the South Africa, let me restart that. This nuclear-capable bipedal tank is said to have lurked in the wings of both outer heaven of South Africa and Zanzibar land in Central Asia. One theory holds that the development had progressed to a working prototype stage, but the weapon never materialized on the world arms stage. In a strange coincidence or a casual connection, it was none other than Solid Snake who saved the world from the threat of Metal Gear during both incidents. But history does indeed repeat itself, and the specter of Metal Gear rose once again in the state-of-the-art weapons development program on Shadow Moses Island. When I reached this point in the narrative, I suddenly checked myself. Wasn't Metal Gear's time effectively over? Ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union late last century, the idea of mutual assured destruction and the arms race to maintain this dangerous status quo have been fading into obsolescence. The START II treaties signed by both superpowers had already started to chip away at the nuclear stockpile even back then. In fact, the disposal facility at Shadow Moses had been built to disarm and temporarily store many of these same warheads. With the very idea of nuclear weapons under serious scrutiny, why would the military invest in the development of a nuclear-capable tank? Or was there something more to this weapon? The nature of the beast. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Metal Gear Rex, the newest of its kind. Almost 45 feet in height, equipped with Vulcan cannons and laser array, it's shielded by a cutting-edge composite armor, rendering the unit practically impervious to even heat warheads. And I haven't even gotten to the truly scary part of this thing. The crown jewel of this Shadow Moses Metal Gear was its railgun technology. The gun was designed to fire nuclear warheads clear of the atmosphere, where they would automatically align themselves to the target and ride the optimal trajectory back down to Earth. So what, you may think? There's a big fat missile flying in from the sky. Who cares where it came from? Just shoot the damn thing down. But here's the catch. You won't be able to find any of Rex's warheads, let alone shoot them down. Don't believe me? The facts bear me out. Normally, ballistic missiles go through 4 phases from launch to impact. The first is the boost phase, which consists of the time between the missile's launch and the point at which it leaves the atmosphere and exhausts its supply of rocket propellant. Following the burnout, the rocket enters the post-boost phase that concludes with the separation of the re-entry vehicle that contains the warhead. The third stage is the mid-course phase, in which the re-entry vehicle separates and achieves a controlled descent back into the atmosphere. The warhead's re-entry into the atmosphere and its arrival to the target mark the fourth and terminal phase. Current missile defense systems are alerted to incoming ballistic missiles by detecting the rocket burn during the missile's boost stage. However, Metal Gear's missile technology employs a railgun rather than conventional rocket propulsion to achieve boost stage acceleration. As a result, there is nothing for existing missile defense systems to detect. The railgun's effectiveness is nothing short of amazing, with a range of over 3,000 miles, rivaling that of the mid-range ballistic missiles. It reliably homes in 170 feet of the target 50% of the time, placing it in the same class as high-end ICBMs. The ability of a Metal Gear to conquer virtually all terrain means that the railgun can launch a stealthy nuclear strike from almost any spot on the globe. This invisible attack will make it impossible for anyone to pinpoint the origin of a given missile, even in the state of a strike, without a clear aggressor to retaliate against. The concept of mutual assured destruction falls apart. Without the fear of that, the existing rules of nuclear non-engagement would no longer apply. It also wouldn't matter if the whole world knew that a nuclear missile would be launched from Shadow Moses Island. The missile defense system was helpless against the new breed of ballistic missiles. This was exactly what the terrorists counted on in unleashing Metal Gear Rex and its all-powerful nuclear weapon against the world. I feel like my voice is starting to go out. Okay. I am taking a break right now on my eyes looking at the screen for so long. I feel like my eyes have been staring directly at the screen for the last 38 minutes. So give me a moment. Please give me a moment while I rest my eyes. Actually, I want to go grab my water too. Alright. What I finally saw inside the fortress. Anyway, I trudged through the cave, sweating under the weight of my trusty cleaner. Soon the rocks gave way to smooth walls and a row of bright lights. I had finally arrived. This was no doubt the cradle of insurrection. military facility which Solid Snake so brilliantly penetrated, the eye of the storm that threatened to engulf the world. Fortunately, there was not a soul to be seen. Could, however, hear a faint cry amidst the whistle of the wind. Gary, help me! I couldn't believe my ears. How could anyone on a remote island that I had never visited know my name? I took a good cautious look around, saw a familiar figure among the steel pillars in the corner. It was John D., my cousin, who'd so carelessly pitched me overboard into the sub-zero water only a few hours ago, was now sitting on the ground, tied to a post. What happened? Or what had happened? Help, Gary! I trotted over to where he was calling pathetically, a tuna heavy on my back. He smiled weakly when he saw me. What the hell happened to you, John D.? I asked, crouching down next to him. I don't know. Right after I let you off, this black helicopter came around. A helicopter? Yeah, a kind of squarish black one. The next thing I know, I'm tied up here. Gary, why are you still wearing... Gary, why are you still wearing that fish? Was there more to this, as I suspected? Who was responsible? Military? Or that mysterious group mentioned on the disc? The one whose authorities outstrips even that of the President of the United States? My thoughts were interrupted by a sudden gunfire. I instinctively pulled the tuna over me again. Gary, you gotta help me. Untie me, will ya? Where was the shooter? The bullets were widely ricocheting off the posts, making it impossible for me to pinpoint the origin. If I stayed put, I was dead meat. What should be my next course of action? Untie me, man, Gary. Don't call me Gary, I'm just a tuna. I started to run, dodging bullets and sprinting up the stairs. I was unstoppable, speeding away like a gazelle in a large fish skin. Farewell, Cousin John D. There are responsibilities greater than your safety that I must shoulder. Mine is a high and lonely path. Solid Snake versus the Army of Darkness. Hey! Good reference there. Although there were no zombies in Metal Gear Solid. Let's take this for a moment to review Solid Snake's steps. The nuclear weapons disposal facility that he had infiltrated was crawling with terrorists, and engaging the enemy was unavoidable. This was a battlefield, no mistake about it. Snake's progression had been impeded at every step by the patrolling squads of super genome soldiers, and such formidable foxhounds as Psychomantis. He's using foxhound as a noun. Or is that a proverb or pronoun? I don't know. Anyway, the master of psychokinesis and mind reading, the chameleon-like decoy octopus, the chain gun-wielding giant Vulcan Raven, and Sniper Wolf, one of the best marksmen in history. The following is a profile of individuals whose involvement with the government conspiracy seems to be the most intimate. The information should help make the terrifying truth about this case more clear. Revolver Ocelot, an ex-Spetsnaz, also known as Shalashaska. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, he found lucrative contracts as a mercenary in conflict-ridden regions throughout the world. His activities led to his recruitment by the U.S. government and his entry into Foxhound. As his codename indicates, he is a brilliant marksman whose preferred weapon is a revolver. Ocelot challenged Snake when he came looking for Kenneth Baker, the president of Armstech Incorporated. But the battle never reached the conclusion Ocelot wanted due to the sudden intrusion of the stealth camouflage-clad cyborg ninja. The ninja's sword cut a deadly arc right through Ocelot's right arm, and Ocelot retreated in agony. The Russian sharpshooter also served as a liaison between his terrorist band and a Russian militia led by the renegade Colonel Gorlukovich. According to Foxhound leader Liquid Snake's master plan, the Russian militia would join them on Shadow Moses after the nuclear strike had been launched. They would then commence an all-out assault on the rest of the world from their safe retreat on the island. with nuclear missiles that could neither be detected nor defended against. Over 1,000 first-class Russian soldiers, next-generation genome commandos, and the combat skill and tactical cunning of Foxhound, this new army's objective was nothing short of World War III. The Ninja. The mysterious figure equipped with reinforced exoskeleton and stealth camouflage confounded Snake as well as the terrorist with his superhuman strength and agility. His interest seemed not to have been what was happening within the facility. Evidence suggests that he was there solely to engage Snake in battle. It was through such an encounter that Snake realized the identity of the ninja. His name had been Gray Fox, and he was supposedly to have been killed by Snake, his best friend. This may seem surprising, but the dead coming back to life is a fairly routine occurrence. There are examples throughout the world to prove the fact. When Roland Grace's grave was relocated in 1952, there were deep gouge marks discovered on the inside of the Hungarian farmer's casket lid. It looked as though the dying man had tried to claw his way out of the coffin. On a brighter note, a Japanese man called Jin Imon Natakama walked out of the stalactite cave in 1914, a full 10 years after he had gone missing while exploring the same cave. His family was doubly astounded to discover that he had apparently not aged a day since they last saw him. All this makes complete sense to me, and it should to you as well in the moment. 2 words, pyramid power. I have no doubt that Gray Fox was forced to undergo the same revival process by military scientists in the course of their horrific genetic experiments. Liquid Snake. I know exactly what you're thinking as you hear the name of the man who led the Shadow Moses uprising. And my answer is yes, Solid Snake, our hero, and Liquid Snake are none other than twin brothers. They are not, however, twins in the usual sense. This is yet another manifestation of the US military's dangerous love affair with genetic engineering. The 2 snakes are fighting machines created through the so-called project Les Enfants Terribles. The rumors that the government is attempting mass production of super soldiers are numerous and persistent. Just the other day, I came across something called the People EO, a humanoid combat droid. Development on the outer shell had gone off without a hitch, but the unit had to have a human being inside to function, which decreased its utility somewhat. The military finally realized the fact late in the game and pulled the plug. There was also a plan to use a well-known psychokinetics DNA material to breed an army of gifted soldiers. Unfortunately, someone pointed out that there is indeed no spoon, at least not in a normal combat situation. Solid and Liquid Snakes, however, were successfully created from their father, Big Boss, and his genetic material. They were literally born to be extraordinary soldiers, and it was no surprise that when they finally met, the result would be a titanic confrontation. What I saw on the roof. I hauled myself and the tuna up the steps, dodging the invisible sniper. The spiral staircase seemed to go on forever. Just as I was about to give up the climb, I saw the exit to the roof. I pulled open the door and lurched into the faintly lit gloom. The sub-zero wind felt soothing on my overworked body. I laid the tuna down and sat down next to it, trying to catch my breath. The enemy may pursue me even here, but I had nothing left in me to run with. I pulled out my hip flask of peanut butter and bourbon and took a long swig. The fiery liquid slid down my throat, hot and thick. Peanut butter is my waterloo. When I was a kid, I was a wuss who couldn't eat peanut butter like other red-blooded children. One day, I decided to confront this weakness of mine and put myself on a peanut butter overload. Anything I put in my mouth had to have peanut butter on it. I piled the stuff on everything from chili dogs without onions, my favorite dish, to spearmint gum, to my first girlfriend's lips. Ew, gross. The inevitable result was that I came to hate peanut butter. If I didn't much like it before, I now loathed it with abandon. If I could gather the entire world supply of peanut butter and dump it in the Bermuda Triangle, I would. As it is, all I can do now is eat as much of the stuff as I can. Peanut butter, I will always hate you. And how does that song go? And I'm not singing that. And I will always hate you. Now that's not it. No, that's not it. Well, always? It must be another song I'm thinking of. Can't remember. Snow is starting to coat my shoes. Where is my tuna? Oh, there it is, right next to me. Bright light in my eye. Now I remember what day it is. June 24th, the anniversary of my UFO abduction. Why am I so sleepy? And what was that sound? It was a chopper, a squarish black one, and it was coming closer. Fox Die. The secret assassination virus. If you recall, I wrote that the two hostages, the DARPA chief Donald Anderson and Armstead president Kenneth Baker, died of a heart attack while they were being rescued by Solid Snake. The actual cause of their death, however, was a specially engineered assassination virus called Fox Die. Fox Die is a retrovirus that kills only a select people. Its development was passed on to Naomi Hunter from her predecessor. Once Fox Die finds its way into its target system, the person dies almost immediately. It's practically a viral equivalent of spontaneous human combustion. There we go. Dr. Hunter had injected Solid Snake with this virus, and as he unwittingly made contact with his targets one by one, they fell prey to the retrovirus power. But the decision to infect Snake was not hers. That order, in fact, came directly from the Pentagon, the Defense Department's goal. The true objective of the DoD was to selectively assassinate the perpetrators of the terrorist uprising. All Snake had to do was to come in contact with the targets. The mission objectives he was actually given, namely to stop the nuclear launch and rescue the hostages, were nothing more than a smokescreen. By simply sending Snake in as a disease vector, the Pentagon stood to reclaim their expensive investments, Metal Gear, and the bodies of the genome soldiers with little risk of damage. The Pentagon also believed that Fox Die would successfully cover up the incident by the virtue of its lethality. However, Naomi Hunter's re-engineering of the virus cast grave doubts on the reliability of Fox Die itself. Even though the nature of her manipulation was unknown, the Pentagon decided to take extreme measures to counteract this development. The bomber on the horizon. Alarmed by the news of Dr. Hunter's tampering, Alarmed by the news of Dr. Hunter's tampering, the then Defense Secretary Jim Hausman personally took over the mission's commander and headed for Shadow Moses on AWACS. Around the same time, a bomber took off from a base in Galena, Alaska, carrying a payload of surface-piercing B-6113 tactical missiles. The Defense Secretary had decided on a more direct approach to cover up, fighting nuke with nuke. It was a rationale that smacked of a return to the arms race, and Snake was furious. He had already succeeded in destroying Metal Gear Rex, and the terrorist incident was over for all intents and purposes. Was a nuclear airstrike to be his prize for accomplishing all this? As it turned out, the airstrike never happened. Somebody had commandeered Jim Hausman's orders. You may think that the only person with the authority to override the orders of the Secretary of Defense was his Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States. But like most things in this account, the truth is far from obvious. The hand that stopped the nuclear strike was that of a shadowy secret society. But what kind of a group is it whose power outstrips even that of the American presidency? The face of the enemy. When I came to, I was sitting in a weather station cabin with a burlap sack on my head and my hands tied behind my back. So this is the way it ends, I thought dimly. I haul myself all the way out to this pimple on the Arctic and die at the hands of an invisible executioner without finding out a thing. One of my captors moved in closer and started to rummage through my inside chest pocket. I cursed inwardly. This was where I carried Nastasha Romanenko's disc, the entire account of the Shadow Moses incident. My policy is the best way to ensure that something doesn't get stolen is to have it with you at all times. Clearly, I needed to reevaluate that one. The man easily found and seized the disc. "What is this?" he demanded. "Whatever it is, it's worth more than you." I responded with as much menace and dignity as the burlap on my head allowed. "Well, well, that is something." What followed was both highly tedious and painful, and nothing of the great significance was said until that electrifying statement, "We have the disc back." We've now come full circle since the start of my account, caught up to the point where it originated. It was unclear how the disc had gotten to Max Smith's sign at Mega Surprise, but my captor's words indicated that the disc had originally belonged to them. Either that, or they were the ones who wanted it the most urgently. I took my courage in my hands and opened a dialogue with them. "Yo, you guys happen to be that secret society whose power outstrips even that of the American presidency? Answer me, you artificial coloring on a cheap drugstore candy cane." This had the exact effect I'd hoped for, namely to send them into a violent fit of rage. I must have hit it pretty close to home. The contents of the disc were as good as verified. This was indeed the secret society whose power outstripped even that of the American presidency. In my delight, I hardly paid attention to the obscenities that were being screamed at me, nor to the distinct sound of a gun being pulled out of its holster. It was then that the cabin suddenly erupted into controlled chaos. It seemed only seconds from the time the window was smashed and to the moment I realized that my captors had been decimated and I was alone with my savior. Who was this human whirlwind? I was ready to lose my lunch from the curiosity and the terror. I could taste the peanut butter in my mouth. I could hear the enigma walk up to me, lift the burlap sack off my head. I concentrated on the hammering of my heart for a moment, and slowly looked up. There was nobody there. I could see nothing, sense nothing, but someone was untying the ropes biting onto my wrists. Invisible hands placed themselves on either side of my head in a strange parody of a coronation. They deftly removed the bandana I had earlier fashioned into a clumsy bandage from my bruised head. The faded piece of cloth was not my own, but a flotsam found on the beach. I reached for the unseen figure with my shaking hands, but with one quick flick of the bandana, it was gone. But there were more surprises to come. As I gingerly moved my stiff body, I felt an unfamiliar bulk against my chest and discovered the precious optical disc, miraculously recovered. Not only that, but there were enough backup copies to fill me with awe and pop the stitches in my flimsy pocket. I thought of my mysterious savior, possessed of superhuman fighting ability, invisible and capable of burning discs on an instant. There was only one possible explanation. He had to be an alien, probably the little gray kind. Life after Shadow Moses. And so I came in from the colds of my hole of an apartment in New York. My trusty tuna beside me, the landlord mentioned that my neighbor, the starving student, had gone missing recently. It could be that I was nosing around the wrong information from his machine. If I ever see him alive again, I should apologize. I am currently banging out this manuscript on an antique typewriter. This is the truth as described on the optical disc, and as elaborated and verified by my own experiences on that fearsome island. As this account draws to a close, my thoughts dwell more and more on Nastasha Romanenko, the woman who risked everything by recording the facts of the incident onto this disc. I think it was her way of giving voice to the victims of this mission, the casualties of nuclear weapons throughout modern history, and to all the lives disrupted and damaged by an elaborate government conspiracy. Her will was passed on to a counterculture journalist in New York City. That's me. And the truth is now out there for all to see, just as she had dreamed. Readers, the responsibility to disseminate the facts of the Shadow Moses incident is now yours. What will you risk to know the truth. Publishers afterward. This nonfiction work is based on the factual account written by Nastasha Romanenko, a military analyst who allegedly took part in a secret mission to counter a terrorist incident on Alaska's Shadow Moses Island. Her account was published in its original, unabridged form as In the Darkness of Shadow Moses, after the successful publication of this volume. Gary McDonald, the author, is a journalist and a non-fiction writer who is best known for his past bestseller, The Telekinetic Powers of the Loch Ness Monster, a true energy source of UFOs. The details of McGolden's adventures on Shadow Moses remain uncorroborated, but there are serious doubts as to his tuna-aided land on that. There is in fact ample evidence that he was swept out by another small island several miles south of the Shadow Moses and failed to realize that fact. McGolden has seemingly vanished into thin air following his manuscript's arrival at our humble offices. While this has been a source of great pleasure to our accounting department, I sincerely hope that this notoriously fickle but talented writer is hard at work on a follow-up to this volume. Though certain aspects of the book require further fact-checking, this alone should not dissuade you of the veracity of many of its main assertions. Nor should you dismiss the contents of Nastasha Romanenko's disc outright. Instead, readers should approach this account with an open mind and a sense of adventure, much as Gary McGolden did when he first received the disc in the mail. I should note, however, that Gary was mistaken about one thing. I never mailed him that disc. Max Smithson, Editor-in-Chief. Mega Surprise Magazine. Okay, and that's going to cut it for here. Deuces, my juices.